Welcome to Georges River Local Planning Panel. We're the panel who've been appointed by Council to determine the applications on this particular agenda. My name is Sue Francis and I'm the chair of this panel. And with me today I have Milan Maracek on my right, Jason Carricker on my left, and far left, Erin Sellers, a community representative. I'd like to acknowledge country. The panel acknowledges the traditional custodians of land on which this meeting is being held as that of the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. Now, importantly, we are live streaming. That means a couple of things. Firstly, speak clearly into the microphone. Secondly, remember that you should be respectful of every party and person involved. So inappropriate language will not be tolerated. Now, we had 5 applications on the agenda. We now only have 4 applications on the agenda. And importantly, we should let you all know that if you are here for the development application on 546 Railway Parade, Hurstville, that has been formally withdrawn by the applicant. It is therefore no longer a matter for consideration by the panel or council. It's no longer on the agenda. So if there was anyone here for 546 Railway Parade, Hurstville, you can go home now. Other than that, we have 4 applications: 977 Forest Road, Lugano, 655 to 659 Princess Highway, Blakehurst, 16 Peak Parade, Peakhurst, and 19 to 23 Empress Street, Hurstville. And I'll run through the agenda in that particular order. Now, all of us on the panel have signed a declaration of interest that there are no conflicts of interest in relation to any of the matters on the agenda today. And those conflicts of interest will be publicly available, I think. Sure. Anyway, the meeting process will be, as I said, we'll go in order that I've already mentioned. So starting off with 977 Forest Road. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak and address the panel. And in each case, I will call out the people to speak, and if they will come forward here and then make their representation to panel. We may or may not have any questions to ask of you. And then what we will do is we'll move on to the next person, and then we'll move down the agenda items. We will make decisions on each of the item after the meeting is closed. So we will close the meeting, and then we will deliberate, and then the matters will be on the website as soon as possible. And have we got a time frame that we put things on publicly out?
They'll be available tomorrow.
There we go, available tomorrow, assuming we make the decisions today. Fantastic, so let's get going. So the first item on the agenda is, as I said, 977 Forest Road, Lugano. And I have a Phil Armisen to speak. Please come forward.
Yep.
The floor is yours.
My home backs onto the northern boundary of the property concerned, and I object to this proposal. There were 24 reasons why the LPP refused the original proposal, and Council's assessment report for this review makes it clear that not one of those reasons has been satisfactorily addressed in the applicant's submissions. So basically, numerous shortcomings continue with this proposal. This is despite the applicant having made 2 previous childcare applications. This confirms for me that there is no way these shortcomings can be remedied. And that was obvious from the first development application. The site is just not suitable for a childcare, and the building isn't suitable. Unacceptable environmental and social impacts cannot be avoided. 4 major ones are: acoustic treatments cannot adequately screen neighbours from excessive noise, particularly from the outside play area, when noise will simply reflect off the 9-metre high brick wall directly into our properties. Hazardous traffic and parking conditions for pedestrians and drivers cannot be avoided either, particularly during, or well, it will be during drop-offs and pickups, particularly in Ponderosa Place and Tara Place, which are both cul-de-sacs with no formed footpaths. The streetscape cannot remain unaffected when the proposal is for a parking lot in the front yard and for separate entries and exits. And with regard to the building, there is no way adequate natural light and ventilation can be achieved when two of the walls of the room are underground. On top of these concerns, residents are already experiencing excessive impacts from church activities, impacts which are in breach of consent conditions and subject to current court actions by council against the applicant. This applicant has shown no regard for consent conditions and no regard for its neighbours. In those circumstances, any approval for this childcare would surely guarantee residents would not just be losing our amenity when there are church-related activities, we would also be losing it every other weekday as well. Surely this is unacceptable, and I ask the panel to once again accept Council's recommendation and refuse this application.
Thank you very much. Just for my clarity, could you show me on this plan where your property is?
Directly opposite the outside play.
Down here,
Area.
right, so,
Yes.
so lower down, far down there. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any other questions from the panel?
No questions.
Thank you. Now, I don't have anyone, oh, yes I do, yes I do. Yes I do, apologies. John Hatch. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the panel this afternoon. What I would like to do is just read out the comments from our planning consultants, some comments from the traffic engineer, and then finalise with some of my comments in regards to the project.
You might just need to speak a little bit or get that closer, perhaps.
Oh, okay. Sorry. The first I'll read out is from our planning consultant, Scott Lee, which goes, "My apologies for not being available to address the panel directly as I'm unfortunately attending a funeral of a family member. With this submission, I'm simply requesting that the panel consider the following in its deliberations of the proposed childcare centre at 977 Forest Road, Lugano. The use is permissible, and from a land use point of view, the combination of church and education is one that is repeatedly, literally thousands of times across the city. The site..."
We have got a copy of this. We've got I'm just conscious of time. It mightn't be the best use of time to read it out, that's all.
Right.
Absolutely agree. Don't read something we've already got. Just
Okay, I wasn't aware you had it, sorry.
Yep.
So, okay, and have you got the comments from the traffic engineer as well then?
Yes.
Yes, you have.
Okay,
This one here.
Yes.
yes, yeah. So I will just then probably say what my thoughts are in regards to this particular project. I suppose all I was going to say, I'm a building designer and I'm a solutions-based, I have a solutions-based approach to trying to work for solutions that I like to work and collaborate with others to achieve outcomes beneficial to all parties, which to date that opportunity has not been really afforded with council. As I look at the current circumstances of the site and as I understand its current operations, there's little to no formalised car parking, little to no formalised landscape perimeters, nor a plan of management for the church, which places pressure on the surrounding neighbourhood. If it were possible to engage with council planners and residents to address concerns raised to date, that outcome that could be achieved through formalised car parking arrangements, integrated landscaping, a structured plan of management for the childcare centre with no overlap between the activities of the childcare centre and the church. it would likely alleviate or provide solutions to the current issues associated with the use of the church. If the childcare centre cannot be approved, then the existing concerns of neighbours associated with the church usage will not be addressed and the current circumstances will prevail. I believe it would be beneficial for all if the childcare centre could be approved, as it could provide the catalyst for positive change. Council could apply DA consent conditions in consultation with all parties. I believe will enable this catalyst for change to occur. And
Any questions? Might be appropriate, perhaps, to ask some of the questions that we...
I'll kick it off. I think from my reading of it in terms of the parking issue, the proposal complies in terms of the parking provided to the childcare centre, but it doesn't comply if both the church and the church hall and the childcare centre are all operating concurrently. So the idea is
to separate the activities between the church and the childcare centre.
So the plan of management would then commit that at no time that the childcare centre is operating, that the church will operate.
That's right.
For those spread of hours, 5 days a week. So from 7 in the morning till 6 o'clock, the church won't be used 5 days a week, is that?
That's right, yes. Monday to Friday during those weekdays.
I thought I'd read there's quite a lot of, so all the approvals for function uses and weddings and those, none of those would occur.
None of those would occur.
And you'd be happy to commit to that?
I believe the client would be happy to commit to that, yes.
And can I ask about there's the other issue about traffic and the extra, we'll call it the slip lane, but the egress into the car park, the second one next to the street. Was that initiated by yourselves or by council suggesting that?
It was initiated in discussions with our traffic consultant and our consultant planner. So we are trying to address the concerns that had brought up in the first applications.
Yeah, sure. Porkshire is a bit more efficient, especially drop-offs of childcare, but it just seemed like there might be space in there, because it is right next to a roundabout, which isn't ideal, but it would appear that there'd be space to get in and out of those car spaces and perhaps a dedicated space within the site and still come in and out the existing driveway, which might alleviate some of the Traffic and Roads Act approvals and potentially some impact on trees.
So to maintain the one entrance exit.
Yeah, it seemed that way from looking at it. I mean,
yeah, I think some of the discussions early on had evolved with our traffic consultant and the traffic committee in terms of the best way to flow in out of the site, and that's how this slip lane proposal sort of developed, I believe, and then that got presented to the traffic committee and approved by the traffic committee at a point in the past.
And looking at the space there this morning, it seemed quite damp. I mean, it was raining and it has been raining a little bit, but in terms of the BCA compliance, I don't think a BCA report was lodged. I know the argument is, I guess, at the certification stage, but for a childcare centre, it's fairly common to, at least at a consent stage, be assured that the health and safety for children, which is very important, is able to be resolved. So has that been done? Has there been a BCA assessment?
The BCA report hasn't been formalised now. We've had some discussions with certifiers.
You've had some discussions, so you're confident it'll be able to meet them?
Yes.
Right. And the other issue that seemed to be a bit of a concern was the lack of detail of the acoustic treatment in order to meet the recommendations of your own acoustic consultant, how that might affect either visual impacts or solar access.
Yeah, we've provided details in terms of the screening around to the outdoor play area. Right. The outdoor play area, the actual screen is like, in comparison to the southern boundary, is significantly lower than the adjoining houses on the southern side, because the site is actually significantly lower on that southern side of the boundary.
And the proposed hours are 7 till 6, 5 days a week, no Saturday, right? No more questions for me.
How tall is the acoustic wall?
I think it's around about 4 metres to the top of the actual roof screen.
And if that's 4 metres, was there consideration of the impact of that acoustically and solar-wise? I mean, I appreciate it's to the south of the play area, but has there been further consideration of that? It is often a problem with acoustic solutions, which then result in other things that have not been assessed.
I think in terms of looking at the recommendations of the acoustic consultant, he recommended a particular design for the acoustic screen. That acoustic screen is designed where the higher portion of the roof faces north. So in terms of solar access, you achieve solar access into that area. That acoustic screen on the southern side is below, I think, the actual boundary fence adjoining the southern property. So it is, I think, lower. So visually, it's probably not that obtrusive. But if the adjoining house on the southern side is looking down, then you would sort of see.
But has there been an assessment of the solar impact?
Yes, there has been an assessment of solar
Do we
impact.
have those?
There was a plan that I provided, well, perspective views that I provided in terms of the solar access that were on a separate. There was actually a separate. There was a separate plan that I had, or perspective views that I provided, which sort of showed solar access at 9 a.m, 12 p.m, and 2 p.m. Okay. But they could be further detailed if further information was required.
Just so I understand this access issue, you said the traffic committee had approved it in the context of this application or in another?
Not this particular application, but a previous application.
For what?
For a childcare centre and for, I suppose, providing car parking similar to what we're sort of showing on this proposal.
So you mean the application that was previously refused, of which
yes,
this is a...
I'm getting a little bit confused about the applications, so
I just need to
I apologise for that.
Okay, no, that's fine. So you say the traffic committee has approved this solution.
Yes.
That seems to be at odds with what council was saying, so I'm a little bit...
Yeah, I think it's referenced in the comments.
Conceptually approved, it was subject to further details. Those details weren't lodged.
Yeah, and I think the traffic consultant sort of said, look, you know, there's enough information in the plan provided to provide a reasonable assessment of the proposal, and that could be further detailed as part of the section 138.
Okay.
And can I ask about the disabled access, because there's disabled parking there and there's a slab there, but there's a 200 mil gap
on
through
it.
Yeah, it's called a step.
Yeah.
One of the things that is in the favour when there's a history of unauthorised use, there's some understandable scepticism about the commitment to actually provide what's committed to. So what do you say about the assurance of all the commitments that are being done?
Well, I suppose...
No point having a disabled ramp if you've got a 200 mil
yes,
step to it.
from my perspective, I would be documenting any approved use of the property for a childcare centre and any requirements for car parking to comply with the Australian standards. So it would likely mean that anything that doesn't comply would have to be removed and rebuilt in accordance with the Australian standard. So I would be sort of documenting any detailed documentation to comply with the Australian standards, any DA consent conditions, etc. And that I think there would have to be a detailed plan of management to ensure that everything were to be done in accordance with childcare regulations.
Childcare guideline, it's usually, you have to get a licence, and I think the basis is your commitment is it will comply, but there's no sort of spatial breakdown to be able to work out the ratios of indoor, outdoor. Let's just accept that you've done that and you think it complies. Council's not so sure because it doesn't have the details to enable to verify that. But would there be any difficulty in providing?
There's no difficulty in providing that, no.
I mean, that is particularly important because in the absence of that information, you need to get concurrence.
Well,
and so if council can't be satisfied that that does satisfy the provisions, then concurrence is required and you don't have concurrence. So.
Well, I suppose in terms of areas, for indoor play space we comply, outdoor play space we comply, and I think the discussion has been in terms of natural light and ventilation, which sort of can be utilised in conjunction with mechanical ventilation and other lighting options.
There's quite a lot of prescriptive provisions within the SEP in relation to childcare centres, so
yes.
I think but you don't have any problem with providing that information.
No problems at all.
There's one piece of information that the council has identified, and that is remediation of the land. Now, it says, council says you didn't provide a preliminary site contamination report. This is, which you will need to be able to satisfy in terms of the SEP 55.
Right.
Did you provide one?
No, I wasn't aware of what remediation was possibly being discussed and what area on the site we're talking about in terms of remediation.
I think where you're talking about playgrounds and childcare, you have to satisfy that the land is suitable for the purpose to which it is to be used, which is childcare.
Yep.
And the SEP requires that to be done in a preliminary form, at least in the first instance. I go out there and check, and then if there is some contamination found, then you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we don't even have the preliminary.
I wasn't
report.
aware of any contamination.
No, you may not be, but you need to be able to have a proper contamination report.
Yeah, I wasn't aware it was actually a requirement for the lodgement.
I think it is a requirement of the.
Yeah, in previous childcare centres I've carried out, that hasn't been a requirement.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now I have the applicant to speak, Taipo Mahata. Please come down. If I apologise if I pronounced that wrong. Thank you. Floor is yours.
My name is Taipo Malifa. I volunteer for the church and I do a lot of work for the church as a volunteer. We've done this about 4 times now. We've come to the LPP to try and get our DA childcare centre approved. And I think we'll probably keep going if it is not approved. But I ask this panel to approve it only for the fact that it is allowed by council. This development is allowed at this particular zone of Lugano. And I believe from the consultants that are working on this, that all the requirements that council wants done are achievable. All we need is approval, and then we will go away and do it. This is only the concept stage. And council has a 3-level compliance structure. We do the DA, it gets approved. If it gets onto the construction certificate level, it'll have to comply again. And then if all goes well, it'll ultimately have to be given an occupation certificate, which is also another compliance stage. So I ask the council, this panel, to allow our DA. We've been doing this for a long time, over 10 years. We've come to council with a concept which is fairly close and complementary to church work. We work with old people, we work with young people, and we work with children. And this can only complement our work. And as our town planner has submitted in a letter to you, it is repeated across the city many times over. And so we ask this panel to approve our DA and let us get down to doing the stuff that they ask us to do. They are all achievable. Otherwise, they wouldn't have provided them to us. Our problem has been every time we come to council, they give us the rules and the requirements, and then we go away, and then we try and bring in something that is as near as well, that is what they are asking us, and we come back here and they've, in my thinking as a layperson, they've shifted goalposts, if that analogy is fitting. But this is what the church wants, and this is their property. And we will be coming back here to get it approved. And if it takes 20 years, then it'll be done in 20 years. But this is only the development, this is only and we've spent a lot of money on this, and it's only a concept that we needed to put through. We've spent over $30,000 for consultants and fees and for council. It's only $10,000 to fit out the building, but we've spent a lot of money on this, and only because it's what is best for the property and for our church. Thank you very much for your time.
Any questions?
Are you confident that that same question to you, that you're close to the operation of the church, so are you able to like, essentially close down the activities of the church during the weekdays? Because that's what the proposal's putting forward.
Yes. We made that commitment in a management plan that we've given. Our problem has been we're given a judgment to abide by, and then council puts their own spin on the court order, and we can't do it like this. But insofar as we're able to separate the church from childcare centre during the week, 7 o'clock or 6, whatever the timing is, 7 o'clock to 6, yes, we are able to separate the church activities. Right now, there's absolutely no activity at the church.
No. I suppose I would say that the rules in relation to childcare centres are quite strict. And it's not necessarily a matter of council changing the rules. The rules have been changed on every site, most recently by a brand new state policy about childcare, which is quite stringent in terms of what it expects and what it requires any consent authority to establish before consent. I accept that you're saying this is the first stage, and I know there are other physical stages, but this is the fundamental stage, which you're told that you can or can't have a childcare centre. And some of the fundamental things that need to be addressed are parking, noise, and there are a lot of interrelationships and accessibility and safety because of children. There's a whole raft of things that need to work together. So it's not one thing being solved, because sometimes solving one problem raises other issues. So they are unfortunately quite complicated, and this panel and these people at the panel have dealt with a lot of childcare centres, I can assure you, and they do carry a lot of upfront cost, unfortunately.
Same point I made earlier on applies.
Yeah.
It is there because it's achievable.
Any no other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll now move on to the second item, which is 655 to 659 Princes Highway, Blakehurst. And I have Mr. Mead, who's here to speak on behalf of the applicant. I don't have any objectors on my list. Mr. Mead.
I'll just bring the project architect up as well. This is Peter Dunn, the project architect. Thank you, Chair and panel members. We made a brief submission to you yesterday in relation to the submissions that I'll make briefly now. I'm not sure whether you've got that or had a chance to go through it, but essentially it sets our position. In our view, this application has come to the panel prematurely. There is absolutely no doubt about that. You may say that sounds a little odd when the application's been with council for 27 months. It's rather odd to us as well. We have a situation, we lodged the application 27 months ago. In that period, I think we're on to the 5th town planner that's dealt with the application, which has caused all kinds of grief. Been back and forth to panels and back and forth with making amendments. During that period, though, probably the most significant thing that happened was the RMS served a property acquisition notice on our client to take some of the frontage of the site. That was issued to our client, I think about 8 or 9 months into the DA process, and obviously had significant ramifications. That came about when the application was referred to the RMS for concurrence. So again, it was a surprise to our client that he now had a site that he had to deal with that issue. That said, our clients worked through that process, and that was settled with the RMS in December last year. So a short time ago. That obviously had implications for the design of the scheme, because effectively we lost, I think, in the order of 4 metres of frontage of the site, which then required shuffling of the built form on the site. You'll see in the recommended reasons for refusal, there's 10 reasons. 7 of those go to what we would call concurrence matters, which I'll talk to briefly. And then there are two merit items, which I'll need to address the panel on also. Our request is that the panel defers the application to allow the concurrence process to run its course. As you well know, it is the onus is not really on an applicant to get those concurrences moving along through the state departments to the extent that they won't talk to us during the process, and you would have all been in this situation. So we're now met with a report that says we don't have RMS concurrence. That's despite the fact that RMS have acquired part of the site, and that has then led to them asking us to do a series of things related to the frontage, and they have wanted more information. And we haven't been given the opportunity for that to be closed out, despite the fact that we've given the RMS every document that they've asked for, and they're in the process of assessing that. The second issue is with State Rail, which is related to the same issue. You might say there's no railway line there. So what's that about? It's just power for the railway. Again, because the road frontage works, they've asked us for additional information in terms of engineering sections as to how this is going to work. And again, all of that has been passed on to them, and we sit in this waiting game like we often do with State Rail, the same as the RMS. We can't control that, and it is entirely unreasonable that that's a reason for refusing this DA. That's reasons 5, 6 and 7 related to State Rail and the RMS.
Just to clarify, is it concurrence that's required or just consultation?
Yes, there's a concurrence for the RMS, yes, because the access point is within the 90 metres or 100 metres of the arterial road. I lose track of the criteria and I have to ask every single time. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So we acknowledge that you have jurisdictional issues here unless we're not asking you to step into the shoes of the concurrence authorities, despite the fact that a deemed concurrence period does apply. We're not asking you to do that. We're simply asking to be able to close those issues out. I need to turn then to the merit issues, because you may say, well, we can give you time to sort out the concurrences, but there's other issues with the DA that would preclude you from approving it. The first two reasons relate to the height of the building. What we did overnight also was served a clause 4.6 in tracked changes format that simply changed a number that relates to an RL to the lift overrun. So you have a current 4.6. We understand it's a jurisdictional issue, and so we've gone about trying to remedy that. You'll see throughout the staff report, the assessment of the 4.6 to me is a little hard to follow, to be honest. The assessment in many parts away from the 4.6 section of the report talks about height being a minor breach and being relating to small components of the building, being the lift overrun, and facilities related to the common open space on the roof. For example, in the SEP 65 table on page 111 of the report, the commentary, the encroachment is minimal and only affects the lift overrun and the rooftop area of communal open space. Lift overruns and shade structures and so on related to common open space are commonly approved in this LGA. As you would know, this panel commonly approves DAs with those as non-compliances. In terms of the common open space, that was included on the scheme at the request of the design review panel about 29 months ago, and that was then incorporated in the scheme. You'll see that the design review panel has in fact said that they could support additional height on this site beyond just the lift overrun and the common open space and non-compliances. We were nervous about bringing that to you, and so we never did that. We left it at the common open space and the lift overrun. But the panel was very strong. Professor Peter Webber, in fact, encouraged us that rooftop open space is what you need, and so we went away and did that. So we say that the objectives of the control are met. As you'll read through the report, there's no suggestion that there is a suggestion that the objectives are not met, but there's no evidence behind that in terms of impacts on any adjoining properties that would cause the 4.6 to fail in terms of meeting the objectives. In terms of going to the environmental planning grounds on this are clear, like many of the other decisions this panel has made, that there's the benefit of the common open space being provided on the roof. And there's also the benefit of the disabled access being provided to that space by the lift, which has the overrun, which breaches the control. The sections in the 4.6 that you'll see show that the building otherwise is entirely compliant with the height controls, and the scheme, as indicated in the report, complies with the FSR controls. So it's not about additional habitable space within that additional height. In our view, the 4.6 is well founded, and the panel could support that. That's the first two reasons. The reasons 3 and 4 then go to other issues that may be said to be jurisdictional issues. I'm not sure that's entirely correct. In terms of reason 3, it talks to acid sulfate soils management as an issue. There has been a geotech study submitted with the DA, that was submitted 27 months ago with the DA, and it raised no issue with acid sulfate soils. If there's a need to impose a condition for a management plan, then so be it. That
plan has been commissioned.
That's been commissioned. In terms of reason 4, SEP 55, again, rather disappointing in the sense this is a former service station site. So contamination has been done to death on the site, and site validation has been issued, and there's no issue with that. Council, I think 2 months ago, by email in January of this year, so 24 months into this process, it suggested that the SEP 50, the contamination study that had been issued with the DA, needed to deal with the adjoining commercial building on the site. That's the first time we were requested to do that. Again, we have commissioned that report. We question whether it's necessary in the sense that we think the SEP can be satisfied, but it's been commissioned all the same. Council are aware of that. It was commissioned 2 days after we were asked to do it. Again, great expense to the client, but no time to close that out before being hurriedly placed on the agenda. That's reasons 3 and 4. Reason 9, I'm sorry to jump around, but reason 9 goes to the trees on the site.
8, the transition.
Oh, sorry, transition. Yes, transition is related to height. So, yeah, interesting one again.
So down to the rear.
The planning controls on the site are pretty simple. The subject sites has a 21-metre height limit, and the adjoining sites to the west have a 15-metre height limit. So there's a 2-storey differential envisaged between the town centre sites and the adjoining medium density zone, and that medium density zone then transitions down to an R2 zone. So effectively inherent in the controls is transition. So to suggest that then the controls got it wrong, being very new controls, and that they meant something else about transition, we find hard to accept as well. In terms of the separation, building separations and so on to that land, we meet the ADG requirements, and there's no suggestion in the report that we don't. And again, that seems to have been related somewhat to the height non-compliance. It's not. The part of the site, the western part of the site, complies strictly and it is in fact well below the height limit. The breach is the lift overrun and the common open space. So the two matters can't be linked, and we say that the planning controls inherently set up the desired urban form for this centre. The trees on the site, again, the issue here is the DCP mapping which we have here is very clear in terms of requiring an access way along the rear of the town centre to essentially unlock the development potential not only of our site but other sites to the north. There's a suggestion by council, and we accept strategically there may be an issue at the centre of the block in terms of this continuing right through, but the DCP has always envisaged that there'll be an access point running from the north and running from the south through here, and that's exactly what we have done. Again, that provides transition to the neighbouring sites in terms of not having built form closer, but effectively it's unlocking the potential for our site and also the potential for the adjoining site to the north to realise the B2 commercial centre aims, where this precinct has been upzoned significantly, and we say this is central to that unlocking of the development potential. So there seems to be, throughout the report, it says that's a great idea, you're unlocking the potential, that access way will work really well, and in fact we should condition it to right away. And that seems to, on the other hand, you might be better off not having it, because then you could protect some of those trees.
So the large tree on the corner of the dedicated lane and, well,
Yes.
and that,
Yeah, we'll
that
show
one
it
there basically gets taken out by the rear access lane.
That's right, yeah. So this is,
No, they're mutually exclusive.
yeah, this is showing it in plan. So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the big tree.
Yeah.
And then the other two.
Yeah.
But they're all, so the laneway itself gets too close to them. But in effect, what we show on this section is, if you consider the root ball and the canopy of that tree, to protect it effectively, this site could only ever be developed as one building rather than two.
Yeah.
We say that the fact that our ecologist is totally comfortable that the tree is endemic, it was planted in isolation in 1943-ish, should not preclude realising the B2 objectives, zone objectives, which are all about commerce, encouraging live work in a mixed use centre and those types of things. I'd understand if we were talking about a different zone, a lower density residential zone or an ecological zone or recreation zone. This is a B2 commercial core, and retaining that one tree, or sorry, those three trees, it seems the main issue is about the big one, certainly should not preclude realising those very ambitious aims that are new aims of council, and that tree was in existence when council showed on that DCP that the lane should run straight through it. So again, we say that should not preclude the panel from...
So basically, you're requesting that the panel defer to resolve or allow council to resolve the jurisdictional issues of the RMS, State Rail. You say you've dealt with the clause 4.6 issue already, that would be wrapped up. The contamination issue you've already put in motion.
Yes.
And then and the acid sulfate's been dealt with as part of the...
As part of the
Well, clause
contamination
4.6 is apparently already amended.
We've really tackled all of the issues with authorities. There were no real blocks. We're just doing the final tidy up.
And that's what I say, it's just premature, and understand that operationally the desire to get through these applications. This is just one that needs that little more time to get through a process that we can't control, which is a state government concurrence process.
Okay. Any questions?
No, not for me. I do have one question. Madam Chair, through number 8, where you're looking at the the refusal point 8 about the 6-storey scale. Did you consider, or were there plans submitted that showed a 5 stories?
No. There's been about 4 or 5 different plans along the way. There's been a 6-storey component along that edge. Okay.
The first scheme along the bank was 5.
But there was a higher at the front.
It was higher in the corner.
In fact, we did that
yeah.
because we thought that was a good distribution. The council absolutely, and the first design review panel absolutely supported that.
Yeah.
But council came back after the meeting and said under no circumstances would we allow you any increase in height.
Was that bridge? So the additional
Actually,
story on the front bridged the height.
That's right, and that goes back to my earlier comment
But in
about
all cases, we were within our FSR, it wasn't an FSR.
But breached the height at the front.
So this was a sort of a balancing, was it?
That's right. It goes back to the comment made before about the nervousness of having a breach of habitable space, and so then we end up with the lift overrun and the common open space, but the habitable space, the building, complies with the controls.
Well, basically, we were told to stick within the envelope. We were actually pursuing what we thought were good traditional
design solutions,
where you bookend a small strip, you get a slightly higher scale on the corners, but we just hit a brick wall. As simple as that.
Okay.
I might have misunderstood, but I understood perhaps recently council might have got concurrence from RMS. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
It's news to us.
Oh, there you go. Some good.
It's not before us, so regardless, jurisdictionally, we need to deal with that.
Yeah, it's not you do. Just on the FSR, Jeff, so I didn't ask this as council stuff before, but when you were talking through these, it just made me think about it. So the site area, is that being cast on the reduced site area after the acquisition, and does it take out any road reservations? You know that?
Yeah.
The site area clause in the LPP that says you can't count it where it's...
I know that has been totally expired. It's no longer, we've had new
right, so it's all been based on a reduced site area. No part of the site includes a refusal to pay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next item, which is not the railway parade one, because that one's been withdrawn. And it is the 16 Peak Parade, Peakhurst. And I have William Caravellis and Bernard Morris here to speak.
Good afternoon, panel members. I'm Bernard Morris. I'm the town planner. I've got William Caravellis here, the designer. The registered architect unfortunately could not make it. He's in the process of receiving a triple bypass, so we've excused him, I guess, from attending. In terms of the subject DA, it's a review of a previous refusal. It's an 82A review. Rather than going through every aspect of the report, we'll just narrow down, I guess, to the main issue, which I assume all stems from the site frontage. What has, I guess, evolved since the application was initially refused? I guess first and foremost, the neighbouring building to the west, I think at 18 to 20, has already been approved. The corner, yep, for a residential flat building development. In order to try and consolidate and achieve the required frontage, attempts were made to acquire the neighbouring sites to the east. The dual occupancy evaluation was made, formal evaluation was provided, and formal offers made. These parties had no interest in selling. So as it stood, we couldn't consolidate with these neighbouring properties. And again, the aspects of, I guess, what council's raised in terms of, I guess, amenity, built form, scale, separation, we feel as though have been addressed. The design incorporates numerous measures in order to mitigate any potential privacy impacts to neighbouring properties. In terms of the scale, I guess, of the building, we have submitted a 4.6 variation to the standard in terms of the rooftop communal space and access to that space. We feel as though there are sufficient planning grounds to vary the standard, given that this council does, and I'm sure this panel does, continuously vary this height standard when it relates to the provision of a communal open space on a roof. Having said that, the site is only for 6 units, and it does back onto a reserve along its rear as well. So the need, in my opinion, the need for communal open space on this building is probably not going to really serve to offer any great amenity benefit to the future occupants, but space has been provided. In terms of, I guess, the application, I guess, setting an adverse precedent or not being in the public interest, there are numerous approvals within the local context where council has approved a site for this form of development where it hasn't met the frontage width requirements, and they've also sought to provide, I guess, elements to the building in order to address visual privacy where it hasn't complied with the separational requirements of the ADG. We have an example here, but I guess if the panel would like to see it, otherwise we're happy to move forward from there. In terms of parking, we've again requested that our traffic engineer review the proposal in terms of manoeuvrability. He's again provided us an amended report, which we have here, and we're happy to table for the panel, that says that the proposal is capable of complying with the relevant standards. There was...
capable or does?
Does, but where it doesn't, where it actually deviates.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've asked we asked the question. It's provided.
What's the answer?
The answer is that the circulation in the basement complies with Australian standards, but the passing bay at the street entry is a little undersized. So we're 5 metres deep by 5.5 metres wide. We're supposed to be 6 by 6. If the panel's happy, I mean, we're happy to have a deferred commencement to say that that should be, because we can amend that to satisfy council. So if this was to be approved and the panel wanted to put a deferred commencement condition in that that be addressed to satisfy council, we're happy to do that.
So what you're suggesting is instead of 5.5 crossover, there'd be 6 metre crossover.
Correct.
So that's nearly half the width of the block.
Correct. So it's an additional half a metre.
I guess in summary, in terms of the other aspects of the proposal, we do have documentation here. It was provided to council, I guess, during the assessment stage, indicating that it does comply with the solar access and ventilation requirements. We've also tabled, and I think it was already previously tabled in terms of the provision of storage. And the fact that the proposal does provide a requisite amount of storage to each apartment in this building. I guess foremost, we'd like to say that the inability to consolidate the subject land with neighbouring properties, I guess, should not preclude the ability of this site to be redeveloped in a manner that's envisaged by the density of the zone. So
It doesn't. There are many other permissible uses in this particular zone that this site can be developed for. The isolation provisions don't say you have to do the same. It just says you have to be able to develop in accordance with the zoning.
Yeah, in a medium density zoning, yeah. If the controls were anticipating a built form.
A consolidated built form with double the size of the width.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. I think your isolation argument's a bit weak in my mind because the controls anticipate double.
Yeah.
You don't have double.
Yeah.
It doesn't. There's nothing that precludes you from developing in accordance with the zone.
Yeah.
There are other permissible uses within the R3 zone that you can develop in accordance with. Dual occupancy, for example, on the adjoining block is one of the permissible uses.
Yeah. If the zoning envisaged that form of development, the height and FSR wouldn't be at the level it would be in the medium density zone if it was just anticipating dual lock development though. So our argument, in our opinion, the density, the heights made available to the land envisage this form of development in
lieu
with
all the other performance criteria in the development control.
Agreed, yeah. But again, probably one example I'd like to raise is that there was a development previously approved here at number 13 Pearce Avenue, and
Where is that relative to this side?
It's around the corner.
It's just around the corner.
When the
There's an 18 DA, but it looks in.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
if I may, on this before it changes. Sorry. It's
Maybe this site so we can.
sorry. Yeah, so it's that side. That's the side on the corner. There.
Oh, okay.
Looks a bit bigger than yours.
It's 100 square metres bigger.
To the northwest.
It is 100 square metres bigger, but 11 units were approved on this site.
What was the frontage of that?
It was 11.58 metres with an R.
It does?
Yeah.
It's got two frontages.
Right.
However, there
Oh, it's on
was.
the corner.
It's on the corner.
I don't think that's a comparable site. It's got two frontages.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate.
So the other one's 27 metres, right. So it's 27 on Glover Street and 11 on Pearce.
And that
But
was
the
approved.
address is Pearce Street.
The reason we're raising this as an example is because there's a dual occupancy in a similar scenario to its west, that this site could not consolidate with. And as you can see in terms of the information we have provided, there were numerous shortfalls in terms of the separational requirements of the ADG, and these were still considered acceptable, and the resulting built form was still considered suitable for the site, notwithstanding the non-compliances. And again, there is an attached dual occupancy, which this site could not consolidate with, and was considered okay to proceed with both a primary street frontage shortfall. And I do appreciate it is a dual frontage. However, that doesn't move away from the fact that there were still numerous non-compliances or non-conformities in terms of ADG compliance and the like. So
It was also approved as affordable housing, so they got a
there was an
there's
FSR
a bonus
bonus
in floor space
also
as well.
on that site.
So they got 1.2 to 1.
Can we keep this?
You sure can, yeah.
Also, the report suggests that we're non-compliant in solar access. We did provide the solar chart to council.
Their views from the sun, are they?
Yeah, they've used from the sun, and it's got every unit and the hours that they receive solar access.
15 minutes
That's your current,
elevated above the ground,
Yes.
1 square metre.
So,
Because the trouble with these views from the sun, they don't tell me how much the sun penetrates.
Okay.
I mean, it's a classic situation with solar access. You know, it's got to be 2 hours, 70%, penetrating, 1 metre, 1 metre, 1 metre, 15 minutes. And that's how you know you've actually achieved the 2 hours. What these don't tell me is how far the sun comes into the living areas. That's all. I also don't know what those living rooms, whether they're living rooms and whether it's also private open space. I don't know whether private open
worked
space.
it out from the plans. Is this the latest scheme?
This
or-
is just views from the sun.
Yes, it is.
I can't see the private open space on the balconies. I can't see down.
Okay. Well, I mean,
I think that's council's problem. They don't have the information. This is not sufficient information to demonstrate that you satisfy that provision.
I mean, for
Unfortunately.
example, we've got, these are the rear units and they're the balconies and they're the, so, I mean, I thought it was pretty clear, but council didn't come back and say, can you explain further? So,
Is there any other questions you'd like
I
to
don't
ask
have
us?
any. Has anyone else got any other
I did
questions?
have one question. You mentioned the sites to the west that have already got the approved DA. Did you say that you approached them to look at consolidating?
They're already approved.
I understand that,
18, yeah.
but still there could be an option for consolidating even with that approval?
Yeah, Will?
the client of the neighbouring development, it's actually not just that, it's 1820 and the next, it's 3 properties, it's those 2 and the next one.
Sure.
They're looking at starting construct, it's consortium of 5 different people. They are clients of ours, well, some of them are clients of ours. We did approach them, but they're looking at starting construction in June this year, so they're not looking at basically ditching that DA, lodging a new DA, going through the process in order to amalgamate and have 4 properties instead of 3.
Is that something you demonstrated to council? Because the report suggests that you hadn't done that.
No, we didn't because there was a DA approval on that site.
Right.
So council, we had a meeting with council. Council asked us to look at consolidating with the dual occupancy, and therefore we got a valuation on those 2 properties and approached them. Council didn't suggest that we need to speak to the owners of the other side. So.
Certainly we open, notwithstanding a consent on 18 to 20, to do an amended DA, an amending DA to incorporate another site. You wouldn't have to wait. They could still commence their application. You just have an amending one on yours.
I don't know if council could
Yes, can.
amend.
No, they're not. No, it's an amending DA, i.e. it's a DA that amends that approval. It doesn't mean to say you don't have the current approval on 18 to 20. It's just an extension of it.
But again, the owners or the parties of that.
Sorry, I thought you said you knew them and you.
I do know them, but I know two of the 5 owners.
All right, okay.
But
I
they're
mean,
set with
yeah,
their,
it's your choice, but
sure.
you're not precluded from doing that because there's a consent, is what I'm saying. Okay. Any other questions? No, Adam?
Would you like us to leave these?
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
So there your shadow, the sun, used for
The sun and also the relevant shadow diagrams?
Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
that's good on the elevations, that's great.
So, yeah, so just to explain, these red areas show the additional shadowing by being over the height limit.
Right.
So if we complied with height, it would be what's in black.
Yep.
And the additional shadows are in red.
Yep.
Just to explain.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So the next item is 19 to 23 Empress Street, Hurstville. And I have a Jim Apostolou, sorry. What? Thank you. The floor is yours.
I'm just here to really just answer any queries. We're happy with the recommendation, obviously. So it's really here for any questions that you may have.
Okay,
You're happy with the
Helen,
recommendation?
are you happy with all the conditions?
And conditions too, yeah.
Helen, any questions?
I just have one question about, we were discussing the variation in the height and just the enclosed area and the communal open space. Was there any consideration given to maybe softening the impact of that? I know obviously you've got landscaping around the boundary of the communal open space, but maybe would there be any opportunity to sort of soften the bulk of that lobby area and lift
Stair and the lift, isn't it?
The stair and lift, it's, I guess it's difficult to do anything about that location of those two structures. And that's why we put the lobby on the other side as far away as possible from the southern neighbour. And then we have the landscaping on the perimeter. So, you know, I'm not sure what the concern. You're talking about sort of neighbour concern?
You've got retractable walls, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And you've
So you could
got,
open up the space, yeah.
most of the remaining walls are glazing, is that right?
Correct, yes.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go.
I guess potentially you could increase the area behind, you know.
In terms of landscaping? Or?
Yeah, I think the question is, can you get any planter beds or landscaping along the blank walls of the lift and toilet?
Okay, that we can do and really, and allow for a little path, I guess, for maintenance of that landscaping.
Yeah, you'd have to get some.
Yeah.
Can I ask about, sorry.
You go.
The affordable housing units, so which ones are they? It's 5, isn't it?
There's 5 in total. Yeah.
Usually they like to be grouped together when community housing providers manage them, because there's always these issues about how you deal with stratas and who's going to be responsible for what maintenance and so on. And
Yeah.
it's always good to have them grouped. So is that what they are? Are they grouped or are they salt and pepper?
No, they're all on the ground floor.
Okay.
So we have a one better and three.
So there's 7 units on the ground floor. So which 2 aren't?
There's
a plan there.
There's 4 on the ground floor and 1 on the first floor.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And is there a community, would there be any concern if it was approved to require some proof of engagement of a community housing provider, perhaps prior to works? I mean, the issue
I think
is
under a certain number, it's hard to get a community housing provider, I think.
they have to be managed by a community housing
They
provider.
have to be? Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, yeah.
And the issue is that sometimes, they've got, and a lot of them do salt and pepper things, and they have a bigger portfolio and they manage ones within other buildings, but there's a whole lot of practical issues to run through in terms of how they're set up and managed, and it's good to engage with that early, because sometimes it might need potentially some tweaking and you want to know that before the end,
I'm not sure if the owner has spoken to any community housing providers.
Right.
With regards to that.
Encourage that to happen as soon as
sure.
possible, because of the requirements to have that managed by a community housing provider and their operational needs.
Okay, well, I guess they have a 12-month lead time in terms of building the project, so I'll encourage them to do that. We did approach a couple for another project in Rockdale some time ago, so I could pass on their details to them.
I mean, council
do
should
that.
have details of the community housing.
There is a
providers
list
that they
floating
use,
around,
I'm sure they'll be able to sort
yeah.
that, so
Yeah,
approach them as soon as possible.
yeah, okay.
Thank you. No more questions? Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
So we'll adjourn the meeting at 5:04, 5:05. Thank you.